in his head in connection with a task which he delights in performing. That is the reason why a man ought to engage in the work which he likes best. There is a way of coaxing that wonderful mind of yours to give up its energy and pour it out into action through concentration upon some useful work. Keep on searching until you find the best possible way of releasing this energy. Find the work through which you can release this energy most readily and most willingly, and you will be getting mighty near to the work in which you ought to find success. It has been this writer's privilege to interview many so-called great men who are regarded as geniuses, and as a means of encouragement to you, I want to tell you frankly that I found nothing in them which lows do not possess. They were exactly like us, with no more brains, sometimes with less. But what they had, which you and I also have, but do not always use, was the ability to release the action which is stored up in their heads and keep it concentrated upon a task, great or small, until completed. Don't expect to become as adept at concentration the first time you try. Learn first to concentrate upon the little things you do: the sharpening of a pencil, the wrapping of a package, the addressing of a letter, and so forth. The way to attain perfection in this wonderful art of finishing all that you start is to form the habit of doing this in connection with every task you perform, no matter how small. The first thing you know, this becomes a regular habit, and you do it automatically without effort. Of what importance will this be to you? What a useless, silly question. But listen, and we shall answer. It will mean the difference between failure and success. Chapter 13. Learning from Failure. The 13th billboard on the road to success is learning from failure. The man who fails. Oh, men who are labeled failures, up, rise up, again and do. Somewhere in the world of action is room. There is room for you. No failure was e'er recorded in the annals of truthful men, except of the craven-hearted who fails nor attempts again. The glory is in the doing, and not in the trophy won. The walls that are laid in darkness may laugh to the kiss of the sun. O weary and worn and stricken, O child of fate's cruel gales, I sing that I haply may cheer him. I sing to the man who fails. Alfred J. Waterhouse. There need be no permanent failure. Every reverse and every setback can be turned into a building stone for a solid foundation of success. Failures teach us to be tolerant. Failures teach us to be persistent. There is a great lesson in every failure, even though we may not, for the time being, know what it is. I sometimes think that failure is nature's tempering process through which she prepares men of destiny for their responsibilities. If you can survive repeated failures instead of going down before them, it is strong evidence that you will rise to the heights in your chosen life work. Don't despise failures. Thank God for the privilege of testing yourself under their weight. All honor to him who shall win the prize. The world has cried for 1,000 years. But to him who tries and who fails and dies, I give great honor and glory and tears. And great is the man with a sword undrawn, and good is the man who refrains from wine. But the man who fails and yet still fights on, lo, he is the twin brother of mine. Joaquin Miller. Handicaps, physical and mental. There are two kinds of handicaps. One is mental and the other merely physical. The latter should not worry us very much, where there is a strong, sound mind, even though that mind may be latent and undeveloped. During the western lap of my recent speaking tour, I met a man very much worth knowing. I had ridden in an automobile with him for several miles and talked with him for nearly 3 hours before I discovered that he was blind. He wore dark-colored glasses, but outside of this, there was nothing in his speech or manner to indicate any such affliction as blindness, which belongs under the heading of physical handicaps. But this man was by no means handicapped mentally. He is one of the most fluent talkers I have ever listened to, and he possesses that very rare ability to talk about subjects which cause one to think, analyze, and synthesize. The man of whom I write is Reverend Wilmore Kendall, pastor of the Methodist Church at Lawton, Oklahoma. Dr. Kendall has been blind since he was a couple of years old. Some years ago, he presented himself at the Northwestern University in Chicago for matriculation. They looked at him with surprise, and when he said he had only $35 with which to pay his way through, they commenced to believe something was wrong with him. And something was. What a pity that same something is not wrong with more people. The university refused to permit him to enroll. He walked around the block a time or two, thought out a plan, then came back and asked them to give him just 3 months' trial, and if he did not make good, they could throw him out. More out of sympathy than anything else, they gave him this trial, never expecting, of course, that he could possibly do the work and stick. But he fooled them. He went through that term and through the terms that followed until he got his degree. And how do you suppose he managed to pay the expense of that training? Grip the arms of your chair firmly and get ready for a shock, you fellows who howl, whine, and rail at fate for not giving you a chance. He paid his way by taking notes of the lectures, transcribing them, and selling them to the other students. By the eternal, here is a man whom some of the rest of us would do well to emulate. If we had his self-confidence, determination, power of concentration, and willpower, we could rise to whatever position in life we might aim for, and we may have these in exactly the same way that he acquired his. The following news item, clipped from a daily newspaper, tells of another case of physical handicap which in no way interfered with success. Years ago, a 15-year-old boy fell under a train up in the copper country. He came out of the hospital penniless. His legs below the knees were gone, so was his left arm. His right hand was only a stump. There seemed no place to go but the poorhouse, nothing to look forward to but a grave in the potter's field. No man can have perfect faith in God and still lack self-confidence, a truth which becomes increasingly plain as time passes and the human mind begins to unfold itself. Yesterday, Michael J. Dowling, president of the Minnesota Bankers Association, candidate for governor of the state, told how the boy cheated both poorhouse and potter's field. For Mr. Dowling was the crippled boy grown up, successful, supported by artificial legs, his left coat sleeve filled by an artificial arm. He voiced his philosophy to the Association of Commerce at its noonday luncheon in the Hotel LaSalle. The only permanently helpless cripple is the man with a crippled head, Mr. Dowling said. And in my travels I have found more permanent cripples, otherwise able-bodied, that can be found among those who have physical handicaps. The man who has lost arms, legs, or eyes can be a useful member of society if he is given a chance to fit himself for that work his physical handicap does not prohibit his performing. There is no reason why such a man should not marry and be the center and support of a happy family. Wooden legs and arms are not inherited. Only wooden heads are passed from generation to generation. I have 3 daughters. There's no wood in their anatomy. I have been reasonably successful. There is no reason why any cripple whose heart and head are right should not succeed. Mr. Dowling is right. The only permanently helpless cripple is the man with a crippled head. I know of no remedy for that. But many suffer from lack of mental development who could succeed if they should discover the possibilities within their minds. If you have lost an arm or two, or even both legs and both arms, there is still plenty for you to do in the world if you have not lost your grip on yourself mentally. I am firmly of the opinion that I could get along without the use of my legs, arms, and even my eyes, if my mind were left intact and my tongue were left free to talk to my Ediphone. I feel mightily ashamed when I think of Reverend Kendall of Lawton, Oklahoma. Without the use of his eyes, he is doing and has done so much good in the world, and with the full use of my eyes and all other physical faculties, I have accomplished so little. When you feel inclined to pity yourself, go out and look up a man like Kendall, and go get a good injection of pep from him. It'll do you good. Alibi builders. One of the commonest of mistakes is that of finding an excuse or creating an alibi to explain the reason why we do not succeed. This would be just the thing if it were not for the universal tendency to look every place except the right place for this excuse, which is in the nearest looking glass. Last year, we had a man on our staff who had the very best sort of reason for all that he did not accomplish. He is not with us any longer. He gravitated on and out, joining the ranks of those untold millions which constitute 95% of the people of the world, the fellows who do not succeed. If you asked him his side of the story, he would undoubtedly say there was nothing wrong with him. His trouble was that this magazine did not appreciate a fine fellow like him. It takes a courageous man, a big manly man, an honest man, to look himself squarely in the face and say, I am looking at the fellow who is standing between me and success. Get out of the way so I can pass. We haven't many such persons, but wherever you find one, you find a man who is doing worthwhile things, who is serving the world constructively and usefully. It may give one a certain amount of satisfaction to charge others with his failure and with his poor lot in life, but this practice surely does not tend to improve one's station in life. I ought to know, for I must confess that I have tried it just enough in my time to find out that it will not work. I have in mind a very dear friend who works rather closely to me in the business world. I know him well enough to feel privileged to tell him just what I believe to be his chief handicaps, but up to the present the only results have been to hear him find a fault with me to match every one that I find in him. And perhaps he is right. Perhaps I have more faults than he has. But the big point that I want listeners of these lines to get, remember, and make use of is this. It makes no difference what faults this chap may find in me or in others. He will sink or swim, rise or fall on his own merits, and unless he quits building alibis and goes to building character, by looking himself squarely in the face, he will wind up just where all alibi builders end, in the scrap heap of failure. We all love to be flattered, but none of us loves to hear the truth about our faults. Some flattery is a mighty fine thing. It urges us on to undertake more, but too much of it causes us to lapse into inertia. If I had no enemies, it would be necessary for me to go out and punch my finger in someone's eye and make a few, because I need someone to keep me on the jump, to keep me from becoming self-satisfied, to keep me on the defensive in one way or another. When I am defending myself, I am growing stronger, developing my strategic ability, and keeping and fighting trim, so that when I need to fight, I will know how to fight. It will do you no good to spend time looking for faults in those whom you do not like, or in those who have been courageous enough to point out yours to you, or in those who have outdistanced you in the game of life and are succeeding while you have failed. They have faults, make no mistake about that. But the time you spend proving that they have faults is time wasted, because you can make no use of this proof after you get it. Better by far that you spend this time checking up yourself to find out why you have not succeeded and how you may eliminate those faults which have been pointed out to you. You will not enjoy this as much as you would enjoy the applause of indulgent, admiring friends, but it will do you a sight more good in the long run. The way of success is the way of struggle. I come back once more to claim your attention for a few minutes on a subject which has made a tremendous impression on my mind during the past few years. The conclusions which I have reached have been the only ones that a man with an open mind could have reached. I have seen so much evidence of the soundness of the principle which I shall pass on to you once more, that I can recommend it to you as being worthy of your earnest consideration. If a brick could talk, no doubt it would complain when it is placed in a red-hot kiln and burned for hours. Yet that process is necessary in order to give the brick lasting qualities that will withstand the onslaught of the elements. The prize-fighter must take a great deal of punishment before he is ready to step into the ring and meet an adversary. Yet, if he fails to take that punishment and prepare for the final battle, he is sure to pay with defeat. My little son has just staggered into my study with wobbly legs and with tears in his eyes. He just received a hard fall a moment ago while trying to balance himself on those little legs. He's learning to walk. He would never walk if he did not get many a fall and keep on trying. The eagle builds her nest far above the tops of the trees on some rugged crag in the cliffs where no depredating man or animal can reach her young. But after taking all this precaution to protect her young, she will subject them to another danger just as soon as she believes they are ready to learn to fly. She will take them out to the edge of the rocks, push them over, and make them fly. Of course, she is right there to take the plunge with them, and if they are too weak to fly, she will dart under them, catch them in her claws, take them back to the nest and wait another day or so, then take them out again. This is the only way young eagles would learn to fly, through struggle. It is more profitable to be an attentive listener than it is to be a fluent talker. And as time and experience begin to extend my vision into the silent workings of nature, I cannot help seeing that there is a guiding hand which pushes us into struggle that we may emerge with more knowledge of the things which we need to know in life. The law of compensation is relentless in its work of helping man rise higher and higher through struggle. An athlete becomes an athlete only by practice, training, and struggle, just as a man becomes a doer only by doing. Some men learn easily and quickly, while nature finds it necessary to break the hearts of others before they will recognize her handwriting on the walls of time. Back in my early days, before I had learned to read very much that nature had written for my eyes, I often wondered when, where, and how I would find myself. How I would know when I had come to myself. How I would know when I had found my life's work. I suspect that this has worried many another. To all such persons, I bring a message of assurance and hope. You may be sure that as long as failure, heartaches, and adversities come your way, nature is struggling with you, trying to swerve your course in life. She is trying to switch you off in the sidetrack of failure onto the main line of success. Let me say that previous paragraph one more time. To all such persons, I bring a message of assurance and hope. You may be sure that as long as failure, heartaches, and adversities come your way, nature is struggling with you, trying to swerve your course in life. She is trying to switch you off in the sidetrack of failure onto the main line of success. When you are unhappy, unsuccessful, and in trouble, there is something wrong. These conditions of mind are nature's guideposts, which point out to you that you are struggling in the wrong direction. Make no mistake about this. Nature always points the way, and you will know when you are traveling in the right direction, just as definitely as you know when you have placed your hand on a red-hot stove. If you are unhappy, don't overlook the fact that this is an unnatural state of mind, that you have a right to happiness, and it is a sure sign that there is something wrong in your life. Who ascertains what this something is that is wrong? You do. Only you can do so. A few souls, and they are rare indeed, follow nature's guiding hand easily and readily. The great struggle with these people is not so painful. They respond readily when nature touches them on the elbow with a stroke of adversity. But the majority of us have to be severely punished before we begin to realize that we are being punished. The principles through which material, monetary success, for example, can be attained are comparatively simple. They were laid down in the March issue of this magazine under the heading of The Great Magic Ladder to Success. There are 16 rungs to this ladder, and every one of them is simple and easy to attain, but the price that must be paid in return for this attainment is struggle. Struggle at every step upward. Nothing is gained without something given in return. You may have whatever you want in this life if you will pay the price in struggle, sacrifice, and intelligent effort. To this extent, you can avail yourself of the power of the law of retaliation, a law through the application of which you get exactly that which you give. When a stranger, or a man whose record you know not of, appears at the gates of your employment and asks you to submit to his leadership, it can do no harm if you at least take the trouble to compare him with the man at the head of the works, to see which seems to be the sounder leader. Stop worrying and fretting over your troubles and adversities, and thank the Creator that He wisely placed these guideposts in your pathway to help you right yourself. The normal state of mind is happiness. Just as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, happiness will come to the person who has learned to change his course when he comes to the mileposts of failure, adversity, and remorse. Most of us have heard of a certain word called conscience, but few of us indeed have learned that this thing is a master alchemist, which can turn the dross and base metals of failure and adversity into the pure gold of success. But it is true, not figuratively, but literally. The harder your struggle seems, the more evidence you have that you need to be worked over. When adversity, failure, and discouragement seem to stare you in the face most unmercifully, let me give you this formula through which you can defeat these. Change your attitude toward your fellow men, and devote your entire efforts to the task of helping others find happiness. In your struggle, which is the price you must pay nature in return for her work in transforming you, you will find happiness yourself. To get it, you must first give it away. Do not sneer at this simple, homely advice. It comes from one who has tried the formula, knows it works, and therefore has the right to speak authentically. After you have found happiness, after you have mastered that thing which you call your temper, and have learned how to look upon all of your fellow men with tolerance and compassion, after you have learned to sit down and calmly and serenely take inventory of your past, you will see, as clearly as you can see the sun on a bright day, that nature has made you struggle as the only means of helping you find your way out of the darkness. You will know then that you have found yourself. You will know also that struggle has its purpose in this life. You will know that the Creator took you out to the edge of the cliffs and pushed you over, just as the mother eagle pushed her young ones over, so you could learn to fly. You will be at peace with all mankind then, because you will see that the struggle which you had to make as a result of opposition by your fellow man was the training which you needed through which to find your place in the world. You will also see that you, and not your fellow men, were the cause for this struggle. This probably is the finest editorial I ever wrote, yet I feel sure that only those who have known what it is to struggle, who have known what it is to fail, who have seen success grow out of the worst sort of failure, will appreciate it for all it's worth. The others will appreciate it further down the road, after they have met with adversity, failure, and discouragement, after they have discovered, just as I have done, that struggle is nature's way of training the wobbly baby legs of mankind to walk. Small beginnings make large endings. Out in the city of Lawton, Oklahoma, lives a man to whom I wish to direct your attention. His name is J. Hale Edwards, and he is president of the Lawton Business College. Now, the thing that moves me to write this brief editorial is that this man Edwards possesses certain qualities which you and I and every other person on earth must develop before we can succeed. First of all, he knows that success cannot be attained without paying the price which success always demands. He knows that one cannot get unless one first gives. But of more importance than this, he has learned the lesson which so many otherwise great souls never learn, that the big successes have little beginnings. I went to Lawton to address the citizens of the city at the public auditorium under the auspices of Mr. Edwards' school. In that audience was as fine a crowd of people as it has ever been my pleasure to meet. Had I not met Mr. Edwards, I could have told from the audience which he had attracted what sort of a character he was. I had not seen his school until the day following my address. Naturally, I had expected to find a big, elaborate business school, such as may be found in almost any city the size of Lawton, with a big staff of teachers. Judging from the size and the quality of the audience, which Mr. Edwards had attracted to listen to my address, I would have imagined that his school also was large. But it wasn't. What it did not represent in quantity, I am convinced, however, it made up in quality. The teaching staff consisted of Mr. Edwards and his wife. The equipment was of plain, unvarnished lumber of the homespun type, but as far as I could see, it served the purpose just as well, as though it had been made of pure gold. If you cannot be President of the United States, reach out and claim the next highest place for yourself by engaging in some work which will help men to see the glory of being decent with one another. I give these details not as a reflection on the school equipment of my host, for indeed, this would be poor taste, but instead, as a compliment to his intelligence, to his perseverance, to his determination, and just as surely as you are hearing these lines, J. Hale Edwards will step right up in front and take his place along with the larger and better equipped schools in record-breaking time. The man who is willing to start at the bottom is a rare soul, but when you find him, you may be sure he will climb to the top ahead of the fellow who starts further up the ladder. There are larger schools than Mr. Edwards, but I doubt that they can give any better instruction than his school gives. In fact, his plant has advantages which the larger one does not. He can give his students closer individual attention. I know what can be done, even with humble equipment, because I took my first business college work under a man who had 2 little rooms in a dwelling house, his entire equipment being enough to accommodate only about a dozen students. On my desk is a manuscript offered to our magazine for publication. I recognized the name on that manuscript the moment I saw it. I first heard that name some 20 years ago. The fellow back of it referred to me as that rube from the coal mines. He was in college and I was working in the mines. We met and he thought it a shrewd thing to show me up as being out of his class. Calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. It is the reward for long and patient self-control. I have read the manuscript. It is full of splendid English, much better, in fact, than I could write, but it lacks soul. It does not carry a worthwhile thought. It resembles a glass of stale beer. There is no kick in it. The fellow back of that manuscript did not begin low enough down the ladder. Some of that coal mine experience, which he sought to plague me with, would have been good for him, perhaps. I don't know. At any rate, I do know that it never hurts one to begin down at the bottom. In fact, I believe that is the only safe place to begin. This is why I say, keep your eyes on J. Hale Edwards of Lawton, Oklahoma, because he is willing to begin at the bottom. The most remarkable age in all history. Those who live in the present age ought to feel very fortunate, because this is the most progressive and the most interesting age of all history. What a rich heritage man has fallen heir to within the experience of this writer during the past 30 years. We have seen the birth of the automobile, the flying machine, the telephone, the wireless telegraph, the submarine with its possibilities for constructive work in removing ores, fuel, and other natural resources from under the sea, the X-ray, the typewriter, and myriad other useful inventions which help man to harness and use the forces of the universe. But more wonderful than all of these mechanical contrivances has been the discovery of the human mind and its possibilities. We have commenced to discover how to overcome fear, worry, discouragement, and the worst of all negative mental conditions, superstition. We have discovered that nothing is so good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The human race is now experimenting with the human mind. In all great discoveries, the unfoldment comes first by experimentation, then by experience and practice. Soon, we will understand a great deal about that wonderful machine called the human mind. Then, we shall take our next big step forward in the elimination of disease, hatred, disagreements between mankind, and the other string of millstones which hang around the necks of humanity. Those of us who have as many as 50 active years ahead of us may be prepared to see greater achievements within that time than we have seen during the past 50. When the human mind begins to unfold itself, things will begin to happen on this earth. The new age which we are just entering, since the close of the World War, may properly be called the cycle of mental discovery. The one just ended, with the war, may be called the cycle of mechanical or physical discovery. Evolution works in cycles. We have a period of material development, and out of this comes a period of mental development. In the beginning of these cycles, or periods of development, we make foolish use of the tools placed at our disposal, often using them destructively. Just as the submarine was first used as a forerunner of death, it will later be used as a tool of investigation and progress. So, we will have our Ouija boards and other fake mechanical contrivances through which to prevent much of that great unknown, uncharted mass of mental phenomena to destructive use during the beginning of this new cycle of mental development. The way of success is the way of struggle. If the thing you acquired or the position you attained came without struggle, you may be sure it will not be permanent. Remember the oak tree and the gourd. One grew in a decade, the other in a season. Let this disturb us not at all. The encouraging feature is the fact that we have actually commenced to study the possibilities of the human mind. We have our fakers in this study, just as we have always had them. The fellows who will seize this opportunity to prey upon the credulousness of humanity. But gradually, these will pass on, and the truth will stand resplendent in its own beauty, free of embellishments and trimmings placed on it by those who would prevent its use for personal gain. We will have our Sir Oliver Lodge and our Conan Doyle, but they should disturb us not at all. These fellows feel that they're privileged to sell fiction for a profit. We could hardly expect a man like Conan Doyle to produce anything outside of the field of pure fiction, considering the years he has spent in producing this sort of material, his Sherlock Holmes detective stories and the like. In producing these stories, his mind was trained to live not in the field of reality, but in the atmosphere of imagination. Just as a person who tells a lie over and over finally comes to believe it, so do these chaps who live in the field of imagination finally come to believe in their own yarns, spun out of the environment in which they have lived. We cannot blame them for this, except insofar as their yarns mislead the credulous mind to its detriment, causing it to become unbalanced. Truth will finally make such things impossible. We shall learn more about the possibilities of the human mind, and while I do not know for sure yet, I strongly suspect that when we have gone to the bottom of our experimentation and discovery along this line, we shall find that no one on this earth can do anything for us which we cannot do for ourselves. I suspect that we shall find that latent within our own minds are all the possibilities which we could find in other minds. I suspect that we shall find in our own minds all the power we will know how to use, all the power we shall need in this life. The eternal law of attraction. Some parents complain that their sons and daughters worry them by showing a tendency to stray away from home. Farmers complain that their children are attracted by the city. The remedy is simple. Make the home more attractive than the outside, and the sons and daughters will not want to run away from it. Too many don'ts will cause any boy or girl to seek outside companionship and gradually drift away from the home ties. If the boys and girls want music, let them have it. If they want to dance, encourage them to do so. Find out just what it is that attracts them away from home, and then hold them at home by that attraction for them. Restraint naturally makes a person want to cut the ties and get away, regardless of the nature of the restraint. The human mind rebels strongly against everything that is forced upon it. You get people to do things through the law of attraction, not the law of force. The churches, some of them at least, are not as full as they might be. The ministers may complain, urge, and coerce, but the more they do this, the more empty will their church pews become. People will go to church only when they are attracted there. Make the church program as attractive as the moving picture show, and the movies will have to close on Sunday nights. People go to movies because the owners study what the human mind wants and then supply it. It pays to do this in any undertaking. Nothing is so profitable as the rendering of service or providing of amusement which people want. Some children play truant and remain out of school, while others show no particular interest in what goes on while they are in the schoolroom. The remedy is simple. Make the educational system interesting. Make it entertaining as well as instructive, and then you will attract the boys and girls to the schoolroom. They will show deeper interest and remember what takes place much longer. It is always necessary to explain mistakes and failures, but success explains itself. Therefore, devote your time to building a success, and you will not need to create an alibi. Husbands sometimes stray away from their wives when they get a chance, while still others deliberately create the opportunity to do so. How long will it take wives to learn of this law of attraction through the operation of which they can hold their husbands just as they did before marriage? A few wives understand this law, make themselves attractive, and find no trouble in holding their husbands, but most wives have not made this discovery. A few of the more progressive type of employers have discouraged this law and are making practical use of it by making the workshop a pleasant place. Out on the great packing houses and the Chicago stockyards, the packers have learned the value of a pleasant environment. Beautiful restrooms are provided for the women workers. Dance halls with music have been provided, and everything is made attractive and inviting. It's just a matter of time until employers will learn generally to provide working quarters which are as attractive, at least, as the quarters which they provide for their livestock. Farmers and dairymen are beginning to learn, the more progressive at least, that it pays in dollars and cents to make a cow's living quarters dry and pleasant. She will give more milk in this sort of an atmosphere. One of these days, thanks to the intelligent cooperation of the industrial engineers, employers will understand the economic value of providing music for the lunch hour, attractive epigrams and wall cards carrying positive messages wherever a worker may cast his eyes, and supplying light refreshments in the middle of the forenoon and the middle of the afternoon, when the workman's interest is naturally beginning to wane. During these hot days, 50 cents worth of ice, 50 cents worth of lemons, a bucket of water, which is free, and a little sugar, made into lemonade and passed out from workman to workman, would be about as fine an investment as an employer could make. The project would even warrant the services of a boy to carry the bucket around to the men every hour or so, especially during the long hot afternoons. The most unintelligent sort of an employer would see to it his draft horses were properly watered. Why not use the same intelligence in dealing with the manpower of his plant, which is far more important than his horsepower? It would not be a bad idea for some feature film concern or some other energetic Yankee who knows a good idea when he hears of it, to put out a series of short movie films depicting, let us say, the reward of loyalty, the benefit of industrious effort, the value of initiative, and so on, to be shown during a 15 minutes recess in the middle of the afternoon. All who use this idea will do well to provide some sort of music also during the entertainment, being careful to pick music which is inspiring and which would send the men back to their work whistling or humming to the rhythm of some snappy song. That rhythm would carry the workers the remainder of the day, and they would more than make up the 15 or 20 minutes lost during the recess. Make the workshop attractive. Understand this great law of attraction and apply it to your business, profession, or home affairs. Whenever you get another person to do something because he wants to do it, you are availing yourself of this law. This is really the best way to get anyone to do anything, because service rendered in response to this law is never begrudged or regretted. A woman can have her husband arrested and forced to support her, but the better way is to attract him so he will want to do so without force. The same applies to the children who show a tendency toward drifting away from home. There is something wrong in the home which does not attract and hold children. True, this something may be the children themselves, but if we go deeply enough in our analysis, I suspect we will find that the parents are to blame. We parents don't like to hear this said of us when a boy or girl is bad and frolics off with other wayward boys and girls. But if we would face the music courageously, we would have to admit its truth. The professional gossip swears everyone to secrecy and tips from office to office under pretense of being the friend of the man whose character and reputation and future he at heart desires to destroy. Bernard Meador. Tom Sawyer, Mark Twain's famous character, had the right dope. Instead of bemoaning the fact that he was put to work whitewashing a broad fence, he made that work look so attractive to the boys of the neighborhood that he farmed the job out to them, charging them so many green apples for the privilege of painting so many square feet. Anything that you impose upon your boy as a penalty will seem hard to him, and he will want to get out of it, no matter how attractive the job might actually be if presented from a different viewpoint. All of which, summed up in a few words, may be expressed very concretely by the statement that human beings love to be attracted and hate to be forced to do anything. Bill collectors would do well to learn something about this law, especially those whose business it is to collect from people who are judgment-proof and who cannot be forced to pay. The remedy here is to attract them into wanting to pay. When you learn to apply this great law of attraction, you will be an able salesman, no matter what it is you have to sell, because you will have learned the rare art of persuasion, the art of getting a person to do a thing by showing its attractive side, by appealing to the self-interested motive of the buyer. This is the rap and the wolf of all scientific salesmanship, whether one is selling his personal services, goods, and wares, professional services in the pulpit, law office, or counting room, or selling himself to a prospective wife. If your modus operandi contemplates the use of force instead of persuasion, you are on the wrong track, and the sooner you switch over, the better off you will be. There are two ways of getting a person to do a thing. One is through coercion, force, and the exercise of power. The other is through the law of attraction. If you don't now understand the difference in the two methods, nothing else we might say in this editorial could possibly be of aid to you. P.S. This came as an afterthought. It really was suggested by Mrs. Hill, who is my English critic and supplies not a few of the ideas which find their way into these editorials. She suggests that I remind employers that it might not be such a bad idea if they sat in the labor councils with their men and met with them from time to time to consider ways and means of making the workshop more attractive. She believes this might be a very good way of settling difficulties before they arise. Men are going to organize anyway. They're going to listen to the most dominant figure in their midst. The way to defeat the labor leader who is not honest with his followers, and who is bleeding them and leading them astray in many instances, is to step right into the ranks of your men with a leader of your own who will hold up a more attractive bait. Not such a bad idea for a woman. And this reminds me to add a few words to the effect that employers in many instances are directly responsible for the alienation of their workmen's loyalty because they make no attempt to lead them. Men will have leaders. If the men themselves don't discover this, the leaders do. It makes a big difference to the employer who the leader is, what type of man he is, whether he is honest or dishonest, playing a square game with his followers or exploiting them. It also makes a big difference to the men themselves. In some communities, the principal diversion is pitching horseshoes and looking up the mistakes in the past life of a neighbor or an occasional visitor. We suspect that the employer who, out of indifference or ignorance, permits an outside leader to come along and attract the loyalty of his men away from him deserves no more than he gets. It is no mere accident when men go on strike, become unreasonable, demand wages which are not being earned in profits by the employer, and other things equally as impossible, as they sometimes do. It is, or should be, a part of the employer's business to keep his men informed on the capacity of the business to pay wages. Also, it is no mere accident that we find men in some places of employment who are happy, satisfied, industrious, and loyal. Yes, there are such organizations, and there could be many more of them if employers would study this law of attraction a little more closely. The human mind will not tolerate forced control. Prune a tree, and you strengthen its trunk and roots. Destroy the sense of hearing, and the other four senses, or some of them, will be correspondingly increased. The law of compensation sees to it that nothing is destroyed. You can burn a tree, but you cannot destroy that which composes it. Its elements will go back to their original source. You can turn water into steam, but you cannot destroy it. In time, it goes back to its original state. So it is with the human mind. It can be suppressed and controlled in some of its activities, but it will become correspondingly stronger in other directions. Anything that is imposed upon the human mind, against its will, starts that mind to work endeavoring to find another outlet for its energy. This is a principle which lawmakers would do well to remember. The passing of kings, czars, and kaisers is but the latest manifestation of this principle in operation. The Imperial German Criminal Code of 1870 was signed by Bismarck and William I. The sedition sections quoted were enforced against newspapers, labor organizations, and socialists with great severity by Bismarck. The result was unexpected. The Socialist Party became the largest in Germany, and, in general, so much patriotic loyalty and devotion to the form of government was generated that a harness maker is now president of the German Republic, and Kaiser Wilhelm II is studying windmills in Holland. Sections from the Imperial German Criminal Code. High treason and treason. Section 81. Anyone who undertakes by force to alter the constitution of the German Empire, or a federal state, or the succession to the crown established before such a date, shall be guilty of high treason and be liable to penal internment or military detention for life. If there are extenuating circumstances, the punishment shall be military detention for not less than 5 years. Section 82. Any act directly tending to the carrying out of the intention shall be regarded as an undertaking by which the crime of high treason is completed. Section 83. If several persons have agreed upon the carrying out of a treasonable undertaking, but their conduct has not amounted to an offense under Section 82, they shall be liable to penal internment or military detention of not less than 5 years. If there are extenuating circumstances, the punishment shall be military detention of not less than 2 years. Section 85. Anyone who publicly before a crowd, or by declamation or public placarding, or public display of writings, or other representations, incites to the carrying out of an offense punishable under Section 82, shall be liable to penal internment or military detention not exceeding 10 years. If there are extenuating circumstances, the punishment shall be military detention of from 1 to 5 years. Chapter 2. Insulting a reigning prince. Section 95. Anyone who insults the Kaiser, his reigning prince, or during his residence in the federal state, its reigning prince, shall be liable to confinement of not less than 2 months, or military detention of from 2 months to 5 years. Section 97. Anyone who insults a member of the reigning house, or the regent prince of his state, shall be liable to confinement or military detention of from 1 month to 3 years. Chapter 3. Opposition to public authority. Section 110. Anyone who, in public and in the presence of a number of persons, or by the circulation of statements, the public exhibition of placards, or the public distribution of written documents or other representations, incites to disobedience of law, or any lawful proclamation, or an order made by a competent authority, shall be liable to a fine not exceeding 600 marks, or to confinement not exceeding 2 years. And finally, Section 111. Anyone who incites in the manner aforesaid the commission of a punishable act, if a punishable act or attempt results therefrom, be similarly liable as an instigator. If there is no such result, the punishment shall be a fine not exceeding 1 year. In no case, however, shall the punishment exceed that laid down for the act itself. You are a composite of the words you speak, the literature you read, the thoughts you harbor, the company you keep, and the station in life to which you aspire. It is to be noted that the Kaiser's punishments were not so severe as those meted out by American judges in 1919. Verily, it is written in the Scriptures that he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. This applies to you and me as individuals, just the same as to kings, czars, and Kaisers. We can forestall what our finish will be by analyzing what we are now in our dealings with our fellow men. This is no mere preachment. You have heard it before. It is true. But possibly you have not thought seriously that it applied to you. The ex-Kaiser, perhaps, made the same mistake. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. There is no escape from this law. It is as broad as the universe. It governs every person on earth. We can sometimes get around man-made laws, but this eternal law of compensation? Never. Back of this law we may find the real reason why it pays to be honest. We may fool ourselves into believing that we are getting by this law, and for a time it may appear that we are evading it, but eventually it rounds us up and forces an accounting. A little dishonesty and a little experience in lying is good for a person. They act as their own witness and present their own proof that they will not work. Control of steam has been a mighty fine thing for the human race because it has lightened man's burdens and aided in man's progress. But control of the human mind is another matter. The one and only true method of controlling the human mind is that which is self-imposed through the aid of education. Educate the human race. Teach men and women the whys and the wherefores of these eternal truths that we have been presenting in axiomatic form and in mere preachments. Let people know why it pays to be honest, why it pays to be decent with one's fellow men, why the outward acts of humanity correspond exactly to the nature of the thoughts which dominate the human mind, and human beings will need less controlling. They will learn how to control themselves, just as the more intelligent of the human race are doing now. Enough scientific knowledge has been passed on through the pages of this magazine since its birth in 1918 to change the entire trend of the human race in a single generation if it were systematically taught in the public schools. There was enough sound instruction in The Great Magic Ladder to Success, in the March 1920 issue, to so change the attitude of man toward man in a single generation that jailhouses and penitentiaries could be torn down or turned into asylums for the treatment of those who grew up in ignorance of these principles. This is no mere bouquet that we are handing to ourselves. It is a conservative statement of a possibility, and we shamefully admit it. Chapter 14. Tolerance.